Well, welcome, and thank you for joining us today for this webinar on the Emergency Management Assistance Compact. I want to thank Kurt Harden for making this opportunity available to us today. And my name is Angela Koppel. I'm the EMAC Program Director at the National Emergency Management Association. I want to thank Jennifer Perkins, who's doing all of our behind-the-scenes work. You don't see her or you don't hear from her, but she's making all of our webinars work smoothly for us. It's my pleasure to introduce Jack Jowett, who'll be leading you through today's webinar. Jack has been involved in EMAC since the inception of the compact and has served in a leadership position for EMAC during his service with New York State Emergency Management Agency. After Jack's retirement, he joined DEMA as an EMAC advisor. Jack, thank you in advance for leading us through the webinar, and I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Angela. Good afternoon and welcome to the EMAC webinar for Telecommunicator Emergency Response Task Force personnel. I'm pleased to be presenting the webinar today and hope that this information is useful in helping you to understand what to expect when deploying under the compact, as well as knowing what your responsibilities will be when you are deployed. Before we begin, I would like to first remind you that EMAC is a compact between states and emphasize that all decisions regarding the compact are made by the emergency management directors of the member states. Any resource that is potentially available to deploy under the compact must respect state sovereignty and recognize a disaster-impacted member state's right to request or to not request assistance, as well as another EMAC member state's right to offer or to not offer assistance. By the end of today's webinar, you will realize the importance of pre-event preparation, including the development of mission-ready packages, or MRPs, discover how local emergency response through EMAC is triggered, know how states request and offer EMAC resources, become familiar with what to expect when deploying through the EMAC system, and understand the overall reimbursement process. The topics to be covered for you today will be discussed in the context of the 5 phases of the EMAC process. The 5 phases of the process as shown here are the pre-event preparation phase, the activation phase, the request and offer phase, the response phase, and the reimbursement phase. Now let's look at actions that take place in each of these phases. The pre-event preparation phase is the planning, training, and exercising phase. During the pre-event preparation phase, telecommunicators should learn more about EMAC by completing training, develop plans and procedures, exercise plans and procedures, and develop mission-ready packages. Telecommunicators can learn more about EMAC by reviewing materials available on the EMAC website at www.emacweb.org, attending an EMAC training course or an EMAC briefing offered by your state emergency management agency, attending the Understanding EMAC resident course at the Emergency Management Institute in Emmitsburg, Maryland, or by completing the Understand EMAC course, which will be offered online on the EMAC website later this year. Planning for deployment under EMAC can ensure an efficient and effective process for deployment when the opportunity presents itself. Suggested planning activities include establishing a working relationship with your state's EMAC coordinator or EMAC authorized representative, ensuring legal processes are in place to deploy resources as agents of the state. A model MOU has been developed and is available on the EMAC website to accomplish this. Finally, organize resources under state sponsorship. For example, intrastate agreements and state-sponsored teams. Other activities which can facilitate deployments under EMAC include typing and credentialing resources based upon NIMS or other accepted standards, establishing mission-packaged resources that are ready to deploy on short notice, and building capacity to deploy and operate self-sufficiently. One method that a resource provider can use to type resources, estimate the costs of a deployment, and identify the logistical needs of a specific capability is to develop a mission-ready package, or MRP. As we will see, a resource provider that is able to present a completed MRP to the state when queried on the availability of its resource or capability will greatly facilitate the request and offer phase of the EMAC process. The FEMA NIMS Resource Center describes resource typing as the categorizing by capability the resources requested, deployed, and used in incidents. Measurable standards identifying resource capabilities and performance levels serve as the basis for categories. Resource users at all levels use these standards to identify and inventory resources. Packaging typed single resources into capabilities is the next logical step after typing. A team of trained telecommunicators with the equipment necessary to perform a mission is an example of a capability. A mission-ready package formally identifies and describes the single resources that make up a capability and provides other pertinent information relative to that capability when it is deployed. The EMAC website provides over 100 examples of mission-ready package models to assist in building resource capabilities. It also offers 7 downloadable mission-ready package cost estimation templates that can be used to prepare a complete mission-ready package for any capability. The MRP template is an Excel workbook with 6 worksheets. There is a separate cost estimate form for each of the 5 cost categories: personnel, travel, equipment, commodities, and other. Estimated costs included on the individual worksheets transfer automatically to the MRP worksheet, ensuring an accurate accounting of projected cost for the mission. The MRP worksheet contains 20 fields where detailed information on the capability is entered. Data that is required to properly complete the worksheet includes the title or name of the resource, an identification of the resource owner or resource provider, details on the capabilities of the resource, the footprint of the resource and any logistical support that is necessary for that capability to function, and cost estimates. This is an illustration of the MRP worksheet available on the EMAC website. It shows the 20 fields in which you will be prompted to enter data. Cost estimating workshops are accessed as tabs at the bottom of the page. This illustrates the worksheet that is used to estimate travel costs. This worksheet will be the last one completed because travel information cannot be estimated until you know where you are going, for what period of time, and details on travel and per diem expenses. It is, however, a good illustration of the type of information that is prompted by the MRP template and demonstrates how developing a mission-ready package guarantees credible estimates and serves to eliminate guesswork when preparing cost estimates. Often, the most contentious issue with EMAC deployments is reimbursement. Developing the cost estimate for a capability prior to its being needed can not only facilitate the rapid deployment of a resource, it can also facilitate reimbursement by removing challenges that occur with poor cost estimating. A good cost estimate results in a good reimbursement package. Now let's take a look at the activation phase of the EMAC process. During the activation phase, actions take place that initiate assistance through the compact. Most critical is that the governor of a disaster-affected member state declare a disaster or emergency under his or her state law. This action authorizes the impacted state to request assistance and authorizes other member states to provide assistance. The governor's declaration also triggers the activation of EMAC response components and triggers the opening of an event on the EMAC operation system. The EMAC operation system provides a means to both monitor assistance requested and track approved mission deployments. The next phase of the EMAC process is the request and offer phase. In the request and offer phase, resources are requested and offered through state emergency management agencies. Requests and offers of assistance through EMAC can only be made at the state level. They are formalized using the EMAC Request for Assistance form, or REQ-A. The EMAC REQ-A was developed to formalize requests for and offers of assistance. It also is the basis for reimbursement. As shown here, the EMAC REQ-A is a 3-part form that, when duly executed by authorized representatives of both the requesting and the assisting states, constitutes a legally binding agreement. The REQ-A requires states that offer assistance to provide detailed information on the resource or capability being offered and the associated cost estimate. Much of this information mirrors the information that is compiled when developing a mission-ready package. A separate REQ-A is used for each authorized mission. As mentioned, resources are requested through the state emergency management agencies and EMAC member states. If a request is for a resource or a capability that resides at the local government level, a state may reach out to local government resource providers to determine resource availability. A local government resource or capability may only be deployed through EMAC if a state has the legal authority to use non-state resources. As we learned earlier, this legal authority can be established during the pre-event preparation phase. The next two slides illustrate the interaction between a resource provider, an assisting state, and a requesting state during the request and offer phase. Once a request for assistance has been received from an impacted state, a potential assisting state may reach out to a potential resource provider. That resource provider determines whether the resources are available and determines whether it can perform the mission. If the resource provider is able to perform the mission, the resource provider advises the assisting state emergency management agency of resource availability and provides information which describes the resource or capability being offered, any logistical support requirements, and a detailed cost estimate. Upon receipt of this information, the assisting state completes the offer of assistance section of the REQ-A and transmits that to the requesting state. The requesting state reviews the offer being made and makes a determination whether to accept or decline the offer. It is not always the case that an offer of assistance is accepted. This is especially true when multiple offers of assistance are received. The state making the request must determine which offer among many best meets its operational needs. Once that determination is made, the requesting state completes the final section of the REQ-A. At this point, the REQ-A constitutes a legally binding contract. The requesting state then notifies those states whose offers were not accepted and transmits the completed REQ-A to the state whose offer was accepted. The assisting state then notifies the resource provider to begin preparations for deployment and prepares a mission order authorization form, or mission order, which confirms and validates the mission for deploying forces. The response phase is made up of the three stages shown here. They are the mobilization stage, where resources prepare to deploy, the deployment stage, where resources deploy and perform the mission, and the demobilization stage, where deployed resources complete the mission and return home. Now let's take a look at actions that occur during the mobilization stage. The following recommended mobilization actions should be carried out by personnel preparing to deploy on an EMAC mission. Take care of personal business such as family or financial matters. Establish a mobilization timeline and agenda for your deployment. Verify travel arrangements. Gather personal items, needed supplies, and essential equipment, and begin tracking and documenting mission-related expenses. Typically, the assisting state will hold a pre-deployment briefing or conference call. At this time, the assisting state will issue mission-related information, including mission specifics, staging area, duty station, points of contact, tour of duty dates, and so on. They will also provide logistical support information. They will provide the individual or team leader of the deploying forces a copy of the EMAC mission order, discuss health, safety, and security concerns, discuss financial conditions in the mission area and the need for credit cards or cash advances, and explain related expense or travel policies for reimbursement purposes. Any individual deploying as a single resource or any task force or other capability must have a copy of the mission order. The mission order verifies the mission and serves as a credential to pass through checkpoints and proceed to your staging area or duty station. During the deployment stage, mobilized resources deploy and render services in the requesting state. Upon arrival in the requesting state, deployed personnel should report to the designated area for in-processing and forward movement to their assigned duty station, notify the requesting state, their home state's emergency management agency, their resource provider, and their family of their safe arrival, verify their mission assignment, obtain a status briefing from the requesting state, carry out their assigned mission, all the while maintaining contact with all applicable parties. It is important for deployed personnel to understand the following key provisions attendant to an EMAC deployment. 1. You are under the operational control of the requesting state's assigned agency. When on an EMAC deployment, you are working for the state that requested you. 2. You remain under the command and control of your normal home authority. 3. You will take mission requests through the requesting state's incident command structure. And 4. You are subject to recall back to your home state at any time your resource provider needs you. It is important that personnel who may deploy on an EMAC mission understand that they may encounter any of the following conditions or more: limited communications, possible self-sustaining conditions, traumatized residents or coworkers, long working hours, limited sleeping accommodations, extreme or unfamiliar weather conditions, primitive field conditions, and potential cash-only capabilities. Any one or more of these conditions may impact an individual's decision to deploy. Finally, it is important that deployed personnel be aware of requirements for amending or issuing new REQ-As. While you will not be required to prepare amendments or develop new REQ-As, you should recognize these conditions so you can notify proper authorities of the need to do so. If you are deployed and conditions change relative to the provision of lodging or food, there is a proposed change to the length of your deployment, or conditions develop necessitating the repair or replacement of equipment, an amendment to the REQ-A will be necessary. If you experience a change to your mission assignment, such as location or duties, or if you are on a new team rotating into a mission, a new REQ-A will be required. In either case, any change must be acknowledged and signed off on by the authorized representatives in both the requesting and assisting states. During the demobilization stage, deployed personnel complete the mission and return to their home state. Demobilization begins when one of the following conditions occurs. The mission is completed. Either the requesting state or assisting state requests and both agree to terminate the mission. Operations are downsized and the assistance is no longer needed. Typical actions taken by deployed personnel during the demobilization stage include verifying completion of the mission, coordinating demobilization with requesting and assisting states, inventorying and checking and response equipment that was issued by the requesting state, verifying and documenting mission expenses, and verifying travel arrangements for the return home. Other actions include notifying the assisting state's emergency management agency upon your arrival back home, submitting expense vouchers, receipts, and other evidence of expenses incurred to your resource provider, and facilitating or participating in post-deployment briefings. Now let's take a look at the principles of reimbursement. The reimbursement process is initiated when the mission is over and the resource provider's personnel and equipment are redeployed home. Deployed personnel prepare expense vouchers and other financial documents and submit them to their resource provider, who in turn prepares and submits a claim for reimbursement to the assisting state. Principles of EMAC reimbursement dictate the following. The assisting state audits the reimbursement package and pays the resource provider before submitting its reimbursement claim to the requesting state. The requesting state agrees to reimburse each assisting state for all eligible deployment and mission-related costs. Resource providers must understand that the reimbursement process varies from state to state. As with any reimbursement process, claims must be well documented and follow EMAC and jurisdictional procedures. To find out how the reimbursement process works in your state, you should contact your state emergency management agency. The preparation of a claim for reimbursement starts with deployed personnel. Upon returning home, deployed personnel should prepare and submit to their resource provider travel vouchers, timesheets, and receipts for any other purchases made. This is done in accordance with the resource provider's normal procedures and requirements. Deployed personnel also assist the resource provider in compiling expenses and documentation on the use of or damage to equipment, the purchase of commodities, and any approved contractual service arrangements that were necessary to support the mission performed. The The resource provider's responsibilities are understanding EMAC and assisting state travel policies to ensure that any special requirements are followed, communicate with the assisting state during deployment of resource provider personnel, fully audit and pay deployed personnel and other expenses before submitting a reimbursement claim to the assisting state EMA, and keeping copies of all documentation sent to the assisting state. Now let's take a look at the eligible categories into which expenses fall. They are personnel, travel, equipment, commodities, and other. Eligible costs within the personnel category include salary, including regular time, overtime, and fringe benefits. Salary is calculated at the regular rate used by the resource provider. An authorized individual must sign timesheets, payroll documents, and work records. It should be noted that personnel backfill costs are ineligible unless pre-approved and documented in the REQ-A. Airfare to and from the requesting state is eligible provided it is properly documented. Documentation for air travel includes the receipt from the airline or travel agent showing the name of the traveler, the inclusive dates of travel, and the total cost of the travel. Boarding passes will also be required documentation. Eligible ground transportation expenses include taxi fare, personally owned vehicles using federal mileage rates, government vehicle costs, and rental vehicles. Documentation for these expenses includes receipts for taxi fare, mileage records for personal vehicles, fuel receipts for government vehicles, and the contract and fuel receipts for rental vehicles. Costs for lodging may be based on federal per diem lodging rate for the duty area you were deployed to, or the actual cost of lodging. The method used must be pre-identified on the REQ-A and agreed upon in advance of the deployment by both party states. Meals not provided by the requesting state or other entity in the requesting state may be claimed utilizing either federal per diem rates or actual costs supported by actual receipts. As with lodging, the method claimed must be pre-identified on the REQ-A and agreed upon in advance by both party states. Maintenance and operating costs necessary to operate vehicles and machinery required for the mission described in the REQ-A are also reimbursable. The resource provider's forces must keep daily log sheets to document the hours the equipment was in use and records on fuel and oil consumption. Damage must be documented by police or other reports and photographs. Damage is typically minus any proceeds from the resource provider's insurance. Consumables, supplies, and materials used for the mission as described in the REQ-A are reimbursable. Good records of purchases and receipts will be required to be eligible for reimbursement. Expenses in the other category may include repair or replacement costs of equipment damaged during deployment, costs for decontamination or cleaning of equipment, costs of purchasing and transporting supplies by the assisting state or resource provider as approved in the REQ-A, costs to return equipment to pre-disaster condition, and replacement costs of damaged or destroyed non-equipment items. Examples of ineligible expenses are shown here. This includes costs incurred to replace items prior to being deployed, the cost of personal use items such as alcohol, tobacco, or toiletries, unspecified costs not verified by receipts, as previously mentioned, personnel backfill costs unless previously agreed to and included in the REQ-A, any expenses being claimed using a credit card statement as opposed to actual receipts, costs incurred by personnel that self-deploy without a mission order, costs for items not specified or indicated on the REQ-A, and any items purchased outside the tour of duty dates shown on the REQ-A. Some general rules to keep in mind when it comes to reimbursement include the following. If the REQ-A does not include a cost for a particular item, you may not be reimbursed for it. Communication with your home state is essential throughout the mission. If any part of your mission changes, ask for an amendment to the REQ-A. There is no such thing as too much documentation. Your home state may ask you to provide additional documentation. While you may not be responsible to prepare the resource provider claim, you may be asked to assist and should be aware of what is required as a part of that claim. A properly prepared resource provider reimbursement claim is summarized on the EMAC Intrastate Reimbursement Form, R2, shown here. The R2 is obtained from the assisting state along with other reimbursement guidance. Supporting documentation includes those types of records which prove and validate the expenses. Supporting documentation includes, but is not limited to, timesheets, work records, payroll documents, travel expense reports and vouchers, and resource provider warrants and checks, as well as receipts for invoices for purchased goods. The last phase of the EMAC process is the reimbursement phase. The final series of slides illustrates how the reimbursement process is designed to work. Any number of factors associated with a catastrophic event may and likely will result in deviations from the recommended reimbursement process. All parties, including the assisting state, the resource provider, and deployed personnel must be made aware of any alternate reimbursement procedures prior to deployment, as this may affect a decision to deploy. The first step in reimbursement occurs when deployed personnel return home and submit travel vouchers and other documentation on expenses incurred to their resource provider. In the next step, the resource provider audits and pays all claims relating to the deployment. At this point, the deployed personnel responsibilities have been completed. Once its obligations for reimbursement have been met, the resource provider prepares its reimbursement package and submits that package to the assisting state. Guidance on the preparation of the resource provider's claim is provided to the resource provider by the assisting state. This will include the standard EMAC reimbursement procedures and any additional guidance required by the assisting state. The assisting state audits the resource provider's claim, resolving any questionable costs or matters pertaining to the claim with the resource provider. Once it completes its audit of the claim, the assisting state issues payment to the resource provider. At this point, the resource provider has completed its responsibilities under the EMAC reimbursement process. After reimbursing the resource provider, the assisting state prepares its claim for submittal to the requesting state. The assisting state claim uses information provided in the reimbursement claims from one or more resource providers. Once the requesting state has audited the claim, it reimburses the assisting state. Once all assisting states have been reimbursed, the EMAC process for the event is over and the event is closed. Well, we've covered a lot of information in the past 30 minutes or so. In summary, ensuring an effective deployment under EMAC requires preparation and commitment. TERT personnel and resource providers can support the EMAC process by understanding the EMAC process, developing, training, and exercising EMAC procedures, organizing capabilities into mission-ready packages, knowing what to expect when deploying under EMAC, and supporting the EMAC reimbursement process. This completes my presentation today. At this time, I'll hand things back over to our webinar organizer, Angela Koppel.
All right, thank you, Jack. We just have a couple of questions, and you could feel free to type more questions into the questions pane, and we can handle those as they come in. The first question is, who covers worker compensation during a deployment?
Good question. Workers' compensation is addressed in the language of the compact. One of the articles identifies that the assisting state or the person providing the resource is responsible for workers' compensation. If the deployed asset is a TERT resource, and if it's from the local government level, the legal agreement between the assisting state and the resource provider would stipulate the conditions. In my experience, typically resource providers have better workers' compensation benefits than states do. So again, in my experience, the resource providers chose through that legal agreement with the assisting state to stipulate that their benefits would apply.
Okay. Our second question is, during the presentation you stated that you would notify proper authorities if while you were deployed on a mission that something happened where you had to change that mission type, like if your tour of duty dates changed or something like that. Who actually would that proper authority be that you would notify?
Well, it can be any one of the following. and I suppose I could have elaborated on that, but you could call your resource provider or your home entity, who in turn would be advised to call the assisting state to get the process started. Usually a requesting state has an EMAC A team, which is very knowledgeable of EMAC provisions, and they could be notified at the requesting state end to work with the requesting state to make the amendment or issue a new REQ-A. Or you could call the assisting state. Either of the three parties would suffice, or all of them, to make sure that all parties know of the need for it and know that they have to work together to put the amendment or the new REQ-A in place.
Okay. If we deploy responders from 15 separate agencies as a team, do we need to submit 15 separate requests for reimbursements, or can they be combined?
If the resource is a team being sent from a single state, but is comprised of individuals from 15 or so entities or agencies, as the questioner stated, you would need individual intrastate reimbursement forms, or R2s, from each of those entities. For example, if it's a state agency, each state agency would submit a separate R2 to the state. The state, in turn, would combine all of those into one reimbursement request to the requesting state.
Okay. If you have a piece of equipment that breaks while you're deployed on a mission and you need to purchase a new piece of equipment, how's that covered under EMAC?
It's potentially eligible if you need to replace or repair equipment, but the best guidance that can always be given in that situation is to, again, call your resource provider or in your home state, or call the A team in the requesting state to make sure that that will be done before you go ahead and make a purchase, especially for something that's very expensive. That will probably require an amendment to the REQ-A.
Okay. Do resource providers get paid by their home state right away, or are there instances where they can't be paid until they actually receive payment from the requesting state?
Well, as I covered in the presentation, the standard guidance for reimbursement is that the assisting state that sent the resource reimburse the resource provider before it submits its claim to the requesting state. That being said, we probably are all aware of examples in the past where it did not occur that way. Some states have legislation that precludes them from paying resource providers directly. In some instances, cash flow problems may present themselves that make it impossible or difficult to pay, first instance, the resource provider. What we do encourage and suggest to all member states of EMAC is that if those conditions are going to present themselves, that they make potential resource providers aware of it, so that a decision on whether to deploy or not, if reimbursement is going to be an issue, they can make that decision prior to the deployment. Always better to know up front and make the decision at that point than at the end of the process have difficulties in obtaining your reimbursement.
Great. That's all the questions that we have. I want to thank everyone for your attendance today and for Jack's work in getting in preparing for the webinar. As a reminder, when you close the control panel, you're going to have a short 5-question survey that's going to come up, and thank you in advance for completing the survey. Jennifer is going to be sending out a link to the video to the recording of the video, and also a PDF of the slides that we covered today. If you have any other topics you'd like for us to cover, please go ahead and add that to your survey answers. And we appreciate your attention. Thank you very much.